Welcome to Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times, presented by Worth Wealth Management, a weekly conversation with area leaders about how to persevere during uncertain times. Now here's your host, Gary Shorman.
Welcome to Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times. And our guest today knows how to do that, has been through challenging times, and has been a great leader for the state of Kansas. Our guest is Kansas Attorney General Kris Kobach. Kris, welcome to our program.
Great to be with you.
You know what? We talk about leadership and what it takes to be a leader on this program, especially during challenging times. You led our state as Secretary of State for 2 terms and now have just taken over the seat of Attorney General. But that was not an easy process. That was a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah, it was. The election was a tough one. I was outspent more than 2-1 in the primary. And of course, the general election was not a super easy one for Republicans in 2022. So yeah, we made it through.
And now you're jumping into the seat and a lot of items that are there. But one of the things I know, you had a quote that I read that talked about your election and being in the seat is not about you. It's about Kansans and the importance of what Kansans need to do to protect their state. And I thought that was an interesting quote.
You know, right now is a very interesting and challenging time for those of us who believe in the rule of law and who treasure the United States Constitution. And that's what I was thinking about in that quote. We have in my view, we have an administration in Washington that is really pushing the boundaries of the law and what the federal government is permitted to do under the Constitution. And really, the only people who can step in and stop this executive overreach are state attorneys general. And that's really what prompted me to run. Right now, in the past 2 years, one state, Texas, has been really leading the charge in courts. And I thought, Kansas can step up and stand shoulder to shoulder with Texas in defending our United States Constitution. On top of that, there are specific, in doing that, Kansas is serving not just people, our office is serving not just the people of Kansas, but the whole country. But then there are specific things that are happening that are hurting Kansas in particular. One of them is something that I just recently issued a letter to the Biden EPA about, and that is the prairie chicken regulation. And many people have heard about this. I may not know what exactly it is. It's really not about the bird. It's about an effort to shut down oil production in the entire southwest quarter of Kansas, and it will drastically restrict ranchers' ability to graze cattle. It's a really big deal, and we have to protect Kansas ranchers, landowners, well owners' ability to make a living. And so, anyway, there are specific threats against Kansans, and then there are more general threats against our Constitution.
Well, let's talk about that. And you are the one in the seat that has to deal with this, but you talk about a lot of issues, the prairie chicken one. What else is out there that you're looking at? Because like you mentioned state of Texas, they have been a leader in this, but you look at the list from Kansas, it's a good list as well.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another issue that's very much one we're watching, and that's the waters of the United States rule. The Obama administration has, the Obama administration started, and the Biden administration has finished pushing the limits of federal regulatory authority. And they now have issued a rule which declares that any dry ditch, any pond, any wetland anywhere near a river constitutes waters of the United States. And waters of the United States should only be waters that you can navigate a commercial vehicle on, a commercial boat on. And the reason they're doing this is they're trying to, again, take control over the land of the United States, and in particular the land of Kansas, because if this new rule takes effect, the federal government will control what I can do on my farm, what any other farmer or rancher can do on his farm, what any property owner who has anything bigger than an acre can do. And it's really astonishing. And so we are right now, we're getting ready to challenge that rule, but we're waiting to see what the U.S. Supreme Court does. There's a case in front of the United States Supreme Court right now, and that will help define what our approach is in pushing back against the Biden administration. So that's another one on our radar screen. We just joined a lawsuit brought by Utah and Texas And that lawsuit has to do with ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards being used to invest 2/3 of Americans' money in pensions. And basically, the Obama administration issued a rule which says that fund managers can take into account non-financial factors, and specifically these kind of left-wing causes in deciding where to invest your money. And the reason that's such a problem is that when you have a 401k, when you have a pension with your company, when you have a pension with the state, whatever it is, that money should be invested to maximize the financial return, the gain on the investment. It should not be invested to push a particular ideological agenda, whether it be from the left or the right. And it's putting at risk the retirement savings of literally hundreds of millions of Americans. And so we are joining a lawsuit to try to stop that. So unfortunately, there are just so many things happening that are dangerous to Kansans, dangerous to our Constitution, and we're jumping into court to fight.
I spoke a few weeks ago with Senator Moran, who is down in El Paso. Again, immigration issues on the national level are one thing. How does Kansas fit into that whole immigration issue, and what are you doing about that?
Yeah, as many of your viewers, listeners will know, I've been involved in fighting to restore the rule of law and immigration for more than 20 years. And we are doing a number of things. In my private capacity, before I became Attorney General, there's a lawsuit where I was representing multiple Texas sheriffs suing the Biden administration over the Biden administration's violation of federal law. Again, this is quite astonishing. You've got a president ordering ICE agents, ordering Border Patrol to either ignore or violate the law themselves. And there are now several state lawsuits on the immigration issue that Kansas is joining and or leading. That's another one we've done just in the last week and a half. We joined a lawsuit regarding the immigration parole rule. Or it's not a rule, it's not even that, it's not even a formal rule, it's just a directive from the Biden administration to use something called immigration parole, which is supposed to be very, very infrequently used in a case-by-case basis for humanitarian purposes. So suppose somebody comes to the border, they don't have a visa, but they need a life-saving surgery, and they can only find it here, not in their home country. Parole is used to allow that person to come in, even though he doesn't have a visa, get the surgery, and then go back home. Well, the Biden administration is saying, hey, let's use that to allow 360,000 people a year to come in. They can apply online and be greeted at the border and then escorted into the country without any regard for case-by-case humanitarian concerns. That completely twists the meaning of federal law. And we are part of a multi-state lawsuit in that regard as well. It's just one thing after another. And the border problem, it's being wide open, leads to other problems. And of course, fentanyl is the one I'm thinking of most. But all of this massive amount of fentanyl that's coming in, and now it's about approximately 800 Kansans have died in this fentanyl crisis already. The reason it's happening, in large part, is due to the fact that the border is wide open. The cartels are smuggling virtually all of it across the Mexican border, and the Biden administration doesn't seem to care enough to try to secure the border. They just want more people to come across.
You mentioned so many of these issues. Do you have enough of a team at the Attorney General's office to really handle this? Because it looks to me like you have a full boatload of things to do, and having the staff to do that, because you can't do it all yourself.
No, it's an extraordinary workload, and the Attorney General's office is definitely, stressed to the max, because in addition to all of this, we are also assisting Kansas counties in prosecuting homicides and really heinous cases involving sexual crimes against children. So we've got so many things to do, and yeah, our resources are stretched. We're trying to hire people to bring on more qualified attorneys to do this important work for the people of Kansas. So hopefully, God willing, we'll have more attorneys on board in the next 6 months or so, because we really need a full team to get all this done.
Let's take a quick break. I want to kind of spread out to the national level of some things that have hit recently there, and what you're dealing with in your office, and kind of translating that back to Kansas. Our guest today is Kansas State Attorney General Kris Kobach. Back after this.
The most successful investors are those that can keep their emotions in check and take a longer-term view at what portfolios will be worth 3 to 5 years down the road. I'd say that's the most important in determining what investor outcomes are. Market corrections will continue in the future. We've seen many of them over the years, only to see equity prices rise higher, and that'll be the case in the future.
Worth Wealth Management, enhancing lives and strengthening families.
Welcome back to the second half of Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times with the Kansas Attorney General, Kris Kobach. And Kris, there's a whole bunch of items we've been talking about, but on the national level, there's a couple, and I just kind of like your perspective on this, where the Biden administration, now classified documents have gone from the Trump administration to now the Biden administration, and spending an extraordinary amount of time chasing these documents down. How does the Attorney General's office feel? How do you feel about that? Because that's a national item, but it does affect those of us that, in security-wise, what happens in our country.
Well, as I look at this whole document mess with these classified documents, and it's really the classified documents that are
that's a good way to word it, kind of a mess.
Yeah. As I look at it, the one thing that bothers me, obviously, if there is actually a security risk to the United States, and these documents are truly dangerous in terms of being outside of a secured environment, then that's a problem. And if there are crimes committed, that's a problem too. But one of the things that bothers me the most about it is the apparent double standard in the way the Department of Justice has handled the Biden documents that go way back in, even before his time as vice president, and the way they handled the Trump situation, where with Biden, it appears to be, there's another set of documents, no big deal. We'll talk to the president's attorneys and try to work something out. Whereas with President Trump, even though the attorneys were talking with the FBI and with the Department of Justice, they nevertheless had this raid on the president's residence. So there does seem to be a double standard. I issued a letter just a little while ago, about a week ago, an open letter to the U.S. Attorney General saying, look, I understand that you can't provide the details of any criminal investigation that is ongoing, but what you can provide the American people is a timeline and a description of what you, the Justice Department, have done. Why did you act this way when you collected these documents, yet act another way when you collected the other documents? There might be a good explanation, but the Justice Department hasn't given it to us. They haven't given us a timeline of exactly what they did, when, and why. And that's something that the Department of Justice owes the American people. They don't need to tell us what the content of the documents are. They don't need to tell us, what the prosecutors are looking at and where they are in deciding what to do with respect to any potential prosecution. But they ought to tell us what the Department of Justice is doing itself and why. And that lack of transparency really bothers me here, because it does seem like they are not using a single standard in all of these cases.
That's hard when you look across the country of how you get a standard that fits. In the state of Kansas, there's a lot of things that need to get done, and I like your focus on those things that involve Kansas. Right now, Governor Kelly obviously plays a giant role in the state. You as Attorney General are working there. Do you guys have a working relationship to help keep on the same page for the state of Kansas?
Well, I'm still in my first, I guess this is, we're about the 4-week point in my job, but yeah, we haven't had that many communications about specific issues yet. That said, I have had good coordination and cooperation with the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, because on that prairie chicken issue, those biologists there are providing really important evidence in this fight to stop the Biden administration from over-regulating Kansas ranchers and stopping drilling in western Kansas. So we've had good cooperation from her administration so far, and indeed her administration has also spoken out publicly against that Biden rule, and that was heartening as well. So far so good. I think the real test will be toward the second half of the legislative session, when there are some bills on her desk that may test her limits as far as how far she's really willing to come to the middle of the road. But yeah, so far we haven't had any conflicts, and the relationship has been good.
Hey, that's good to hear. I want to just talk leadership and you. You've put a lot of time into leading the state of Kansas, considering other offices as well, going through that process to make that happen. Leaders get here because of people that have been their mentors, et cetera. How did you get to enjoy the leadership role that you're playing, not only today, but really the desire to get into that? Where do your leadership goals come from?
Well, I think different leaders are driven by different forces. In my case, it is my concern for specific issues and my faith. So my love for the Constitution, especially at this time in history when our Constitution is under threat. I felt like the Attorney General's office is one where I could use my skills, and that really that God has blessed me with, and that I could really make a contribution in this specific office at this particular time in history. So that's one of the things that has been so important in driving me as a leader. And then the other thing is having, as you mentioned, having mentors. And in my case, John Ashcroft, the former U.S. Attorney General, for whom I worked at the U.S. Department of Justice for a couple of years. We have remained close, and he has been a wonderful mentor to me throughout the last 20 years of my career. And so having him as someone I can lean on, I can ask for advice, and who really has served as a role model in his own career, having that kind of mentor has been really important to me as well.
I like that answer. And there's people out there listening going, we covered a lot of issues. You're the chief legal officer, for lack of a better term, in the state of Kansas. Somebody wants to get a hold of your office. What's the best way to do that, Kris?
Probably the best way would be to go to our website, and you can find out which, maybe if someone has a consumer, maybe they feel like they've been defrauded. That's one of our big responsibilities. They can contact our consumer fraud division, either by email or by phone. If it's like a county attorney or it's a criminal matter, they can contact our criminal division. But that would be the starting point, because then you can, figure out what exactly it is. It's such a big agency. You can get more specifically in touch with the people you need to reach, and we will do our best to serve the people of Kansas and be consumer friendly. We don't want people to just get a recording and feel like they can't reach out directly to the people in our office.
Thanks for you and the team for serving the state of Kansas.
Well, thank you for this interview. I appreciate it.
Our guest today has been Kansas Attorney General Kris Kobach. Thanks for listening. Our program is brought to you by Worth Wealth Management, where you can live with confidence. I'm Gary Shorman.
Thanks for joining us for Forward Ever, Leading in Challenging Times, presented by Worth Wealth Management. Join us right here next week for another episode with host Gary Shorman. Until then, remember to move forward ever, backward never.